For as long as humanity has existed, we've looked up at the stars and wondered how we got here, and whether we were alone. In Causal Loop, the answer to the latter is obvious. No. Or, at least, we might not have been. Causal Loop follows exo-archaeologist Bale and exo-linguist Jin as they land on the planet Tor Olsat to study the ruins of the Tor civilization. Whatever was here is gone now. Only the monuments and the structures remain. It'd be a pretty neat setup in and of itself. We need more games about archaeology, but that's just the start for Causal Loop, though you wouldn't necessarily know it from the jump. Causal Loop starts slowly, letting you get to know its characters, systems, and world before pushing you into the deep end of the pool that's the actual game. See, Jin and Bale aren't alone. They're accompanied by Walter, an AI housed in a drone armature. It's clear from the jump that Bale and Walter don't get along. Bale constantly needles Walter and openly resents his presence. It's clear that the AI is there to supervise him and keep the mission on track because Bale did something in the past that caused issues, and Walter isn't about to let him forget it. That's why they pay me the big bucks, Bale crows when his idea to open an early door by shorting it out works. Until your contract gets terminated again, Walter shoots back. Even letting Walter have access to his suit so he can activate Bale's amplifier is something Bale pushes back against.
I'll interface remotely and activate the amplifier via suit link.
Oh hell no, you stay out of my suit, buddy.
They don't like each other much, these two. Ironically, Causal Loop wasn't always this way. It kind of happened by accident, according to creative director Kai Masman. The original Walter was more of a tool than a person, but one of the placeholder audios made him come across as a bit snippy. Once they started treating Walter like a character, everything made a lot more sense, and characters like Jen came about as a result. Jen is your moderating influence. She is clearly sympathetic to Bale, but would like him to try to work with Walter to make things go more smoothly. The pacing here is very deliberate, Masman told me. Developer Meyerbound wants you to get to know these characters, and it wants the story and gameplay of Causal Loop to be inseparable. If they could do Hollywood, they were going to do Hollywood. Initially, the opening was much slower paced, but Meyerbound cut out some of it to get to the gameplay faster, and from what I've played, it works. And make no mistake, Causal Loop is teaching you how to play it long before it becomes obvious. Whether it's Jin's gentle ribbing about Bale's speed, he's not fast. Jin often refers to him as Slowpoke.
Try to keep up, Slowpoke.
Show off.
Learning how to scan items in the world and determine their purpose, or having Jin and Bale synchronize their actions to open a door or switch on a bridge at the right time so the other one can cross. There's also some really nice foreshadowing as to what you're actually dealing with before the characters themselves find out. As the group progresses, they gradually awaken more of the Tor technology, which culminates in the awakening of what seems to be a power source. Walter is hesitant to check the thing out because they have no idea what it is, but Bale's full steam ahead and, well, it goes about as well as you'd expect. Jin gets zapped away, Walter's drone armature is destroyed, and Bale dies. When Walter brings him back, things are different. There's a massive megastructure they didn't notice before, alien squids are flying through the air, and there are farting plants. Yeah, no, seriously. And all of this is intentional, because the developers at Meyerbound knew that Tor Olsat needed to feel alien, despite being a barren planet. What does the ecology of a planet like that look like? What still lives here? And that, in turn, influences the story. The blue goo you see everywhere eventually became something that powered the Tor's buildings. But the biggest difference is what the energy source did to Bale. Soon after waking up, Bale is contacted by a Tor named Nalator, who informs him that the device he activated is called the Chronolith, and that Bale's meddling has, quote, fractured the fabric of reality, altering the very constraints that define Bale's existence, unquote. Fancy. In reality, that means that Bale can now see and interact with phase rifts, which allow him to create echoes of himself. The uses for this start small. Is that button that opens a door too far away from said door for Bale to press the button and run through it? Have an echo do it for you and waltz through once he opens the door. That bridge too far for you to cross before it vanishes? Get an echo to press the button for you, and walk on over once it materializes. The cool thing about echoes is that they'll repeat their path over and over again until you tell them to stop, or until you run into them, which will kill them. There are some interesting existential questions here, and even Bale doesn't quite know how to feel about them. What's better is that everything you need to know about echoes is presented diegetically, as is almost every part of Causal Loop's AI. Walter color codes them for you and creates a meter that shows how much time you have while creating one, and where each echo is in their cycle. After getting a good grasp of the basics, I'm taken to a later section to kick off the training wheels. Now there are teleporters, which, like doors and bridges, often need to be activated by an echo, and can also be used by echoes. Handy. And square keys that explode if they're taken out of the socket for too long. Now, the puzzles become more complicated and more interesting. Make an Echo to run down and turn on a teleporter, then stand on it when he does. It takes me to an isolated outside area with a key. Great. I grab that sucker and head back to the teleporter, and the damn thing promptly explodes in my hands.
Ouch! Damn it!
Okay, so teleporters and keys are out, but there's a hole in the wall, so I chuck it through there, zap back through the teleporter, and manage to slot the key into another wall slot before it explodes, though it takes me a few attempts. A couple pit stops later, and I put the key in its lock, which reveals a gravity lift that takes me up real high. A little key throwing and another gravity lift later, and I get to what is probably my favorite puzzle in my time with Causal Loop, and the first one I ever play that requires 2 echoes. I send the first to a lower level, and through a teleporter into a sectioned off room, to hit a switch that controls a force field. That done, I make another echo, this one's blue, who runs around the upper level I got from the gravity lift. He needs to hit another button, but the trick is that there's a force field in the way, and running into one means you'll have a dead echo. To get him through, I have to synchronize my echoes, passing through the force field while creating my second after my first has lowered it. It's not the most elaborate puzzle I play in Causal Loop, but it's a great example of the strengths of Causal Loop's puzzle design. Daniel Ratschum, who designed most of Causal Loop's puzzles, told me he often starts at the end goal when designing a puzzle and works backwards, and from what I've played, that process seems to work well. I'll be honest, y'all, I have an extremely poor sense of direction in both video games and real life, and I'm pretty map reliant. Causal Loop doesn't have one, so my path through it often started with a bit of exploring, finding a phase rift and saying, okay, what can I do from here? What can I interact with? If I push that switch, what happens? Where does that teleporter take me? Then I'd work out the answers to those questions and see what I could do from there. A lot of my time with Causal Loop was spent in trial and error, learning new mechanics and seeing what did what. Sometimes that meant doing something dumb and dying. Others it meant looking at something like a gravity lift over a pit of blue goo and saying, I wonder if I can get into that, and then learning I could in the coolest possible way. But I was always learning as I played it. Mirebound's developers assured me that the full game builds these lessons up organically and reiterates what you've learned, something I got a feel for even though I was jumping around to several points in the game. The fact that I was solving some of Causal Loop's later puzzles without help speaks to how well it teaches you, and both developers I spoke to were proud that folks had been finishing Causal Loop's public demo in ways they hadn't intended. Mirebound is rightfully proud of the way the story and gameplay are inseparable in Causal Loop, but when I asked the team what they were most proud of, they told me it was Causal Loop's optimization. Obviously the build I played was a work in progress, but Mosman told me every decision they made was with optimization in mind, so Causal Loop could run on as many computers as possible. It was a ton of work, but the gamble seems to have paid off. Other studios are now asking them how they did it. The answer? It was a lot of little things, like manually making sure that Causal Loop isn't rendering shadows that you won't see because they're inside of other shadows. The result is that, as of our interview, they tell me that Causal Loop still runs at around 60 frames per second on a 1080 Ti on high settings. After spending a few hours with Causal Loop, I'm not surprised. You can see the attention to detail Mirebound is putting into everything, whether it's the story, the characters, or the world. Causal Loop is shaping up to be a brain-bending puzzler, and an interesting story to boot. It may not have been what I imagined when I first met Bale, Jin, and Walter, but one of the best parts of digging up the past is being surprised at what you find. For more previews of the latest upcoming games, don't miss our recent look at Screamer and Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly Remake. And for everything else in the world of video games, stick with IGN.